Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Enigma. Here we share real-life experiences of encounters with the unknown stories that come from beyond the stars, crafted to help you relax and drift off to sleep. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I love seeing just how far this mystery reaches. Now find a comfortable spot, take a deep breath, and let yourself be carried away. Story 1. The front door failed to acknowledge my touch. My steps, once echoed by the hallway, now absorbed by the carpeted silence, seemed too soft to have weight. The usual creak of the floorboard was absent, as if muted by unseen hands. I moved further in where walls should speak of familiarity. Instead, they offered nothing, as if holding secrets tight. The air, usually filled with faint scents, now seemed barren, yet felt inexplicably dense. My fingers brushed the wall, expecting the familiar coolness, but it felt warmer, almost alive. The absence of the expected was palpable, its presence unsettling, as if the house itself quietly whispered a refusal to reveal. I told myself it was just stress. The first dream came on a night when exhaustion had settled deep into my bones, the kind that makes sleep feel like falling into dark water. In the dream, I was lying in my bed, but something was wrong. A light hung suspended above me, oval-shaped and steady, pulsing with the rhythm of breathing. It wasn't harsh, this light. It was soft, almost gentle, but it didn't belong there. My ceiling had never held such a thing. The light pulsed once, twice. I tried to move my head to look away, but my neck felt heavy, as if gravity had doubled its pull. The light continued its slow, measured breathing above me. I could hear something else too, faint and distant, like the hum of electricity running through old wires. But there was something underneath that hum, something that might have been a voice if I could only focus hard enough to hear it. When I woke, morning light was streaming through my window, ordinary and warm. The dream felt thin, like tissue paper, easily dismissed. I went about my day, showered, ate breakfast, forgot about the oval light entirely. Stress, I told myself. Work had been demanding lately, and my mind was processing the pressure in strange ways. But the dream returned. The second time I was in the same position, lying flat, unable to turn my head. The oval light was there again, breathing its slow pulse above me. But now I could see more of the room around me. The walls weren't quite right. They curved where they should have been straight, and the texture looked smooth, almost metallic. The humming was louder now, and underneath it, that voice was clearer. Still not clear enough to understand, but I could tell it was speaking words, measured and deliberate. The light began to move, not quickly, but with purpose, sliding from directly above me to somewhere off to my left. As it moved, I felt a strange sensation, as if I were being lifted without any part of my body actually rising. The feeling was gentle, like floating in warm water, but wrong in a way that made my chest tight with anxiety. The voice grew clearer. It was metallic, processed, like someone speaking through an old radio. I strained to understand the words, but they seemed to slip away from my comprehension the moment I tried to grasp them. The light continued its slow circuit around me, and I could smell something sharp and clean, like ozone after a thunderstorm, but more artificial, more precise. I woke with my heart beating faster than it should have. The dream had felt longer this time, more substantial. I could still smell that sharp, clean scent lingering in my nostrils. I got up, walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face. In the mirror, I looked tired, but otherwise normal. Just dreams, I reminded myself. Vivid dreams, but dreams nonetheless. It was later that day when I noticed the first trace. I was making coffee, going through my usual morning routine when I saw it. A small circular mark on my kitchen counter, perfectly round, about the size of a quarter. I'd never seen it before. The mark wasn't a stain exactly, more like the counter had been pressed with something warm, leaving a slight discoloration. I ran my finger over it. The surface felt different there, smoother than the rest of the counter. I tried to remember if I'd put something hot down without a coaster, but I couldn't recall doing anything that would leave such a precise mark. It was probably nothing. Old counters develop marks over time. But as I stared at it, something about its perfect roundness reminded me of the oval light from my dreams, though I couldn't say exactly why. That evening I found another mark. This one was on my bedroom ceiling, directly above where I slept. It was smaller than the one in the kitchen, barely visible, but when I stood on my bed and looked closely, I could see it. A faint circular impression in the paint, as if something had pressed against the ceiling from the inside. The third dream was different. This time I knew I was dreaming from the moment it began, but that knowledge didn't help me wake up. I was lying in the same position, but now the room around me was completely transformed. The walls curved upward and met in a dome above me, smooth and seamless. The oval light was there, but it wasn't alone anymore. There were others, smaller lights, arranged in patterns I couldn't quite comprehend. The humming had become a symphony of frequencies, each one distinct but harmonizing with the others. The metallic voice was clearer now, and I could almost make out individual words. They sounded like instructions, but in a language I didn't recognize, though somehow it felt familiar, like a song I'd heard long ago but couldn't quite remember. Time moved strangely in this dream. Sometimes the voice would repeat the same phrase over and over, and I would feel myself trying to respond, though my mouth wouldn't move. Other times, long stretches of silence would pass, filled only with the harmonious humming and the gentle pulsing of the lights above me. I felt watched, not by the lights, but by something beyond them, something I couldn't see but could sense with absolute certainty. The presence was patient, careful, almost tender in its attention. It wasn't malevolent, but it wasn't entirely benevolent either. It simply was, observing, waiting. When I tried to wake up, nothing happened. I focused all my energy on opening my eyes, on moving my fingers, on breaking free from the dream's hold, but my body remained still, suspended in that strange, floating sensation. The dream continued around me, unhurried and methodical. I woke suddenly as if someone had snapped their fingers near my ear. Daylight was streaming through my window again, but something felt wrong. My sheets were damp with perspiration, and there was that sharp, clean smell again, stronger this time. I sat up quickly, looking around my room for anything out of place. Everything looked normal, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I got dressed and went about my day, but I couldn't shake the sensation that something was different. Colors seemed slightly more vivid. Sounds were clearer, more distinct. It was as if someone had adjusted the settings on reality, making everything just a little more intense than it should be. The contamination began that afternoon. I was sitting in my living room reading when I heard the humming. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakably the same frequency from my dreams. I looked around, trying to locate the source. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, like it was emanating from the air itself. I checked the refrigerator, the air conditioning, any appliance that might produce such a sound. Nothing. The humming continued for about 10 minutes, then faded away so gradually I couldn't pinpoint when it actually stopped. That evening, while washing dishes, I saw a light outside my kitchen window. It was distant, hovering above the tree line, oval-shaped and pulsing with that familiar breathing rhythm. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The light was gone. But I knew what I had seen. Over the next few days, the boundary between sleeping and waking began to blur. I would hear the metallic voice while sitting at my desk, speaking those same incomprehensible words in measured tones. I would smell that sharp, artificial scent while walking through my house. Sometimes, in my peripheral vision, I would catch glimpses of lights that shouldn't be there. I started losing track of time. I would sit down to eat breakfast and suddenly realize it was afternoon, with no memory of the hours in between. Or I would lie down for what felt like a few minutes of rest and wake to find it was the middle of the night. The marks on my counter and ceiling were joined by others. Small, precise circles appeared on various surfaces throughout my house, always perfectly round, always with that same smooth texture. I stopped trying to explain them away. The dreams, when I could distinguish them from waking life, became more vivid than reality itself. The domed room was now familiar territory. I knew the pattern of lights above me, could anticipate when the voice would speak and when it would fall silent. The presence that watched me felt less foreign now, almost companionable in its patient observation. In one dream, I finally understood a word, just one, spoken clearly in that metallic voice: remember. The word echoed in the domed space, repeated by invisible speakers until it became a mantra, a command, a plea. Remember what? I tried to ask, but no sound emerged from my throat. The lights above me pulsed in unison, and suddenly I was flooded with images that felt like memories but couldn't be real. Lying on a smooth surface while gentle hands moved around me just outside my field of vision. The sensation of being studied, catalogued, understood in ways I couldn't comprehend. The feeling of time stretching and compressing, hours passing in minutes, minutes lasting for eternities. And through it all, that patient presence, watching, learning, caring for me with an alien tenderness that was both comforting and terrifying. I began to suspect that these weren't dreams at all. The realization crept up on me slowly, like dawn breaking over a landscape I'd been walking through in darkness. What if the dreams were memories? What if something had happened to me, something that had been carefully erased or suppressed, leaving only these fragmentary recollections disguised as nighttime fantasies? The marks throughout my house took on new significance. They weren't random imperfections, but evidence, proof of contact, traces left behind by something that wanted me to remember despite the careful forgetting that had been imposed upon me. I started paying closer attention to the details in my dreams, looking for clues, for connections to the waking world. The texture of the smooth walls matched the feel of the marks on my surfaces. The sharp, clean smell was strongest in the spots where new circles appeared. The humming I heard during the day perfectly matched the frequencies from the domed room. But the most convincing evidence was the feeling of familiarity that permeated everything. The dreams didn't feel strange or foreign anymore. They felt like coming home, like returning to a place I'd been many times before but had somehow forgotten. The presence that watched me in the dreams began to feel less like an observer and more like an old friend, patient and understanding, waiting for me to remember what we'd shared together. Sometimes, in the space between sleeping and waking, I thought I could almost see it, just beyond the edge of my vision, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself fully. The contamination spread until there was no clear distinction between dream and reality. I would find myself lying in the domed room during what should have been my waking hours, listening to the metallic voice speak its incomprehensible instructions. Or I would be going about my daily routine and suddenly realize I was floating, suspended in that gentle, impossible way, while oval lights pulsed overhead. Time became meaningless. Past and present blended together until I couldn't tell if I was remembering something that had already happened or experiencing something that was happening now. The careful boundaries of normal life dissolved, replaced by something larger and more fluid, something that encompassed both the familiar world of my house and the mysterious realm of the domed room. And then one night, or perhaps one day, the dream began exactly as it had the first time. I was lying in my bed and there was a light above me, oval-shaped and pulsing with the rhythm of breathing. But this time, when I tried to dismiss it as just another dream, I couldn't. Because this time, when I reached up toward the light, my hand moved. My fingers extended upward and the light was warm against my palm, solid and real and impossible. The metallic voice spoke a single word, clear and unmistakable: welcome. And I realized that the forgetting was over, the remembering complete, and that I was finally, truly awake. Story 2. The floor seemed to pulse softly beneath my back, but my skin felt no vibration. An eerie luminescence bathed the space, yet shadows seemed to twist without a source. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt encased, as if my breath knew a rhythm not its own. The air whispered an unsettling warmth, dense and unmoving, pressing against me with an unseen weight. Every inch of the room appeared to watch, walls curving in silent contemplation. I wanted to move, to escape the embrace of this alien awareness, but I wasn't sure if I still belonged to myself. I'm telling you this because the symptoms haven't stopped. They follow me everywhere now, these lingering traces of something that shouldn't exist. My apartment feels different when I return from work each evening. The walls seem to retain a subtle curvature that wasn't there before, as if they remember being somewhere else entirely. Electronics hum with frequencies that make my teeth ache. The refrigerator cycles on and off in patterns that feel almost like breathing. My coffee maker activates itself at irregular intervals throughout the night, brewing empty pots that fill the kitchen with the scent of burnt nothing. Sleep has become a negotiation with consciousness. I lie awake listening to sounds that exist just beyond the threshold of hearing. A persistent vibration travels through the building's framework, so low and constant that I feel it more than hear it. Sometimes I wake to find my bedroom bathed in a pale glow that has no source, no lamp or streetlight that could account for its presence. The luminescence fades gradually as my awareness sharpens, leaving only the familiar darkness and the lingering sensation that something has just finished observing me. My neighbors avoid eye contact now. They hurry past my door with quick, nervous steps. When I mentioned the sounds to the woman across the hall, she looked at me with a mixture of pity and fear before excusing herself. The building's superintendent changed the locks on my door without explanation, claiming there had been reports of tampering. But the new keys feel warm in my hand, and sometimes they seem to turn themselves when I'm not paying attention. The dreams are the worst part. They're not really dreams, more like memories that belong to someone else. I see myself from impossible angles, as if viewed through multiple sets of eyes simultaneously. In these visions, I'm always lying down, always perfectly still, while shapes move around me with purposeful deliberation. The shapes never quite resolve into recognizable forms, but their movements suggest intelligence, intention, a kind of careful examination that makes my skin crawl even in sleep. But I'm getting ahead of myself, or behind myself, depending on how you look at it. The real event, the thing that started all this, comes back to me in fragments. I was somewhere else that night, somewhere that felt both enclosed and impossibly vast. The memory surfaces like something rising from deep water, distorted and incomplete. I remember the silence first, not the absence of sound, but silence as a presence, thick and deliberate. It pressed against my eardrums with the weight of held breath. Within that silence I could sense movement, the displacement of air around forms that made no noise as they passed. My eyes were open, I think, but vision came in layers, each one revealing details that contradicted the others. Surfaces that appeared solid shifted like liquid when I wasn't looking directly at them. Lights that had no source cast shadows that fell in impossible directions. There was a figure, or perhaps several figures, positioned just outside my direct line of sight. Every time I tried to focus on them, they seemed to step sideways into a space that shouldn't have existed. But I could feel their attention like heat on my skin. They were studying me, measuring something, taking inventory of parts of myself I didn't know existed. The examination felt thorough and impersonal, conducted with instruments that touched without making contact. Time moved strangely during this encounter. Moments stretched into hours, then compressed into heartbeats. I had the sensation of being photographed by cameras that captured more than just images, devices that recorded the weight of thoughts and the texture of memories. Each flash left afterimages burned into my consciousness, pictures of myself from perspectives I had never experienced. The floor beneath me was not quite solid, not quite liquid. It supported my weight while conforming to my shape with an intimacy that felt invasive. The surface seemed to learn from contact, adjusting its temperature and texture in response to my presence. Sometimes it felt like metal, cold and unyielding. Other times it yielded like flesh, warm and disturbingly responsive to pressure. Above me, the ceiling curved in ways that defied architectural logic. It appeared close enough to touch, yet when I raised my hand, my fingers encountered only empty air. The space contained dimensions that folded in on themselves, creating rooms within rooms, distances that expanded and contracted according to rules I couldn't comprehend. The walls breathed with a rhythm that almost matched my own heartbeat, but not quite, creating a subtle discord that set my nerves on edge. Going back further, I can trace the signs that led to that night. They started small, so small I dismissed them as coincidence or imagination. My watch began losing time in irregular intervals, not consistently fast or slow, but jumping forward and backward in increments that made no sense. Electronics in my vicinity developed quirks. Street lights flickered when I passed beneath them. My car radio picked up transmissions in languages that didn't sound quite human, voices speaking in harmonies that hurt to hear. The headaches came next, sharp and precise, as if something was probing specific locations in my skull. They struck without warning and vanished just as suddenly, leaving behind a metallic taste that lingered for hours. My sense of direction became unreliable. Familiar routes led to unfamiliar destinations. I would leave my house intending to visit the grocery store and find myself standing in empty parking lots I had never seen before, with no memory of how I had arrived there. Sleep patterns shifted without explanation. I would lie down exhausted and find myself wide awake hours later, fully alert but with no sense of time having passed. Other nights I would close my eyes for what felt like minutes and wake to find entire days had vanished. During these lost periods, I discovered evidence of activities I didn't remember performing. Notes written in my handwriting contained symbols I didn't recognize. My clothes bore traces of substances that had no earthly equivalent, materials that dissolved when exposed to water but left stains that glowed faintly in darkness. The smell came gradually, so subtly that I thought it was environmental at first. A sharp, clean scent like ozone after lightning, but with an underlying sweetness that made my stomach turn. It clung to my skin and hair, resistant to soap and shampoo. The odor seemed to intensify during moments of stress or concentration, as if my emotional state triggered its release. Others noticed it too, though they couldn't identify what it was. They would wrinkle their noses and step back, claiming they smelled something metallic, something that reminded them of hospitals or laboratories. My reflection began to look unfamiliar. Not dramatically different, but subtly wrong in ways I couldn't articulate. My eyes seemed deeper, darker, as if they had seen things that left permanent shadows. My skin had a pallor that didn't respond to sunlight. When I smiled, the expression felt practiced, artificial, as if I was remembering how to arrange my features rather than responding naturally to emotion. Photographs from this period show someone who looks like me but isn't quite me, a person wearing my face like an imperfect mask. The vibration started in my bones, a low-frequency tremor that seemed to originate from within my skeleton and radiate outward through muscle and skin. It was most noticeable during quiet moments when external stimuli couldn't mask the sensation. The tremor had a rhythm, a pattern that felt almost like communication, as if something was trying to establish contact through the resonance of my own body. Sometimes I caught myself swaying slightly, unconsciously matching the frequency of the vibrations. Animals reacted to my presence differently. Dogs would whimper and hide when I approached. Cats arched their backs and hissed at empty air around me. Birds fell silent when I entered their vicinity, creating pockets of unnatural quiet that followed me through parks and neighborhoods. Even insects seemed to avoid me, leaving clear spaces in swarms that should have been uniform. Children stared at me with the unblinking intensity of those who see things adults have learned to ignore. But before all of this, before the symptoms and signs and gradual dissolution of normalcy, there was an ordinary evening. I remember it now with perfect clarity, the way you remember the last normal moment before everything changes forever. I was walking along a quiet path, the kind of place where people go to think or to escape the noise of civilization. The air was still and warm, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Stars were visible overhead, scattered across a clear sky like distant promises of peace. I felt content that night, genuinely relaxed for the first time in weeks. Work had been stressful, relationships complicated, but in that moment none of it seemed important. The path wound through trees that rustled softly in a breeze I couldn't feel, their branches creating patterns of shadow and moonlight on the ground before me. I walked slowly, savoring the solitude, breathing deeply of air that tasted clean and simple. There was no warning, no sense of impending change. The transition from that peaceful walk to everything that followed happened in a space between heartbeats, a gap in consciousness that I can never quite bridge. One moment I was admiring the way moonlight filtered through leaves, and the next I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere that existed outside the boundaries of normal experience. That ordinary evening was the last time I belonged completely to myself, the last time my thoughts and sensations were entirely my own. Now, as I sit in my altered apartment listening to electronics hum with alien frequencies, I understand that something is still out there, still watching, still waiting. The encounter may have ended, but the connection it established remains active, a bridge between worlds that cannot be severed. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I feel that bridge trembling with the weight of something crossing over. Story 3. Clock chimed once, but the hour refused to shift. The pages of the calendar hung still, yet the date felt misplaced, as if ticked forward in secret. I cleared the table every evening, each item in its designated space, yet today a napkin lay unfolded, its edge dipping into a cup that should have been empty. My hand trembled as I reached to touch it, and the air quivered, whispering of steps no one had taken. A shadow passed across the room, a silhouette not mine, and what shouldn't have moved did. I've been having the same dream for weeks now. At least I think it's been weeks. The dream always starts the same way. I'm lying in bed, but not my bed. The sheets feel different, smoother, like they're made of something that isn't quite fabric. There's a light above me, oval-shaped, pulsing with a rhythm that matches my heartbeat, or maybe my heartbeat matches it. The first dream was simple enough, just that light hovering somewhere beyond my vision and a sound like distant humming. I woke up with the taste of metal on my tongue, but I blamed it on the old pipes in the building. Stress does funny things to your mind, I told myself. Work had been demanding, sleep irregular, nothing more than my brain trying to process the chaos of daily life. But the dream came back. The second time I noticed more details. The humming wasn't random, it had a pattern, like someone was modulating a frequency only I could hear. The oval light pulsed brighter, and I realized I wasn't lying on a bed at all, but on something harder, cooler. Metal maybe, or something that felt like metal but wasn't quite right. The surface seemed to breathe beneath me, rising and falling in slow, measured intervals. I tried to move my arms, but they felt weighted down, not by restraints, but by the air itself, thick and resistant. A voice spoke somewhere in the distance, metallic and hollow, but I couldn't make out the words. They seemed to echo from inside my own skull rather than from any external source. The light grew brighter, and I felt myself being lifted, though no part of my body actually moved. It was as if gravity had simply decided to let go of me gently, like a parent releasing a child's hand. Then I woke up, gasping, with that same metallic taste flooding my mouth. I started noticing things after that, small things. A coffee mug sitting on the kitchen counter in the morning, though I distinctly remembered putting it in the dishwasher the night before. A faint scorch mark on my pillowcase that hadn't been there when I changed the sheets. The radio in my car would sometimes pick up frequencies that shouldn't exist, not static, but something cleaner, more purposeful, like a signal being transmitted from somewhere very far away. The third dream lasted longer. I found myself in that same space, on that breathing surface, but now I could turn my head slightly. The walls around me weren't walls at all, but curved surfaces that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. The humming had grown closer, more intimate, as if it were coming from inside my chest. I could feel vibrations traveling through my bones, a resonance that made my teeth ache. The voice spoke again, clearer this time, though still incomprehensible. It asked me something I was certain it was a question, though I couldn't understand a single word. The oval light descended until it filled my entire field of vision, warm and encompassing, and I felt a sharp scent fill my nostrils. Ozone, but cleaner, more artificial, like the air after a thunderstorm had been filtered through something mechanical. I tried to speak, to answer whatever question had been asked, but my voice came out wrong, distorted, as if the air itself was changing the shape of my words. The light pulsed once, twice, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, there was a small mark on my arm, just below the elbow, perfectly round, no bigger than a pencil eraser, red and slightly raised. I couldn't remember bumping into anything, couldn't think of any explanation for how it might have appeared. I covered it with a bandage and tried to forget about it. But the dreams kept coming. Each one was longer than the last, more vivid, more real. I began to dread sleep, but exhaustion always won in the end. The space became familiar, almost comfortable. I learned the rhythm of the humming, anticipated the questions I couldn't understand, grew accustomed to the sensation of floating without moving. The oval light became a constant companion, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost like communication. And the details began to glide through. I would catch myself humming that same frequency during the day, usually without realizing it until someone asked me what song I was humming. But it wasn't a song at all, just that endless, modulated tone from the dreams. Electronics in my apartment started behaving strangely. The television would change channels on its own, always to static, and my phone would sometimes display the wrong screen for a few seconds before correcting itself. I found objects in places I hadn't left them. A glass of water on my nightstand, though I never brought water to bed. A book open to a page I hadn't been reading, with certain words that seemed to stand out, though they made no sense together. The air in my apartment began to smell different, carrying traces of that clean, artificial ozone scent that I associated with the dreams. Sleep and waking started to blur together. I would find myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unsure if I had just woken up or was about to fall asleep. The humming would start softly, so softly I thought it might be coming from the building's ventilation system, but it would gradually grow louder and more complex until I realized it was inside my head. The light appeared during the day sometimes, just at the edge of my vision, a faint oval glow that would disappear the moment I turned to look at it directly. I began to feel watched, not by anything malicious, but by something patient, something that was waiting for me to understand. The dreams became more than dreams. They became a place I went, a routine I followed. I would lie down on that breathing surface and listen to the humming and wait for the questions I couldn't answer. The voice grew more familiar, more concerned, as if it were worried about my inability to comprehend. The light would pulse more urgently, and I would feel sensations I had no words for, touches that weren't quite touches, movements that happened without motion. I started losing track of when I was asleep and when I wasn't. I would be at work, sitting at my desk, and suddenly realize I couldn't remember the last few hours. My colleagues would mention conversations we'd had that I had no memory of, projects I'd apparently worked on while my mind was somewhere else entirely. The humming became constant, a background frequency that colored every moment of my day. The mark on my arm faded, but others appeared. Small, round marks in places I couldn't reach, couldn't explain. I stopped trying to cover them up, stopped trying to rationalize them away. They were part of the pattern now, part of the routine that my life had become. I began to suspect that what I had been calling dreams weren't dreams at all. They felt too consistent, too detailed, too purposeful. Dreams fade when you wake up, but these experiences only grew more vivid in my memory. I could recall every sensation, every pulse of light, every modulation of that endless humming. The metallic taste in my mouth became permanent, and the scent of artificial ozone clung to my clothes no matter how many times I washed them. The space where I went each night, or thought I went, became more real to me than my own apartment. The breathing surface felt more solid beneath my back than my own mattress. The oval light provided more comfort than any lamp I owned. The incomprehensible questions seemed more important than any conversation I had during my waking hours. I started to wonder if I had forgotten something important, something that would make sense of all this. The feeling of familiarity grew stronger each night, as if I were remembering rather than experiencing, as if my mind were slowly uncovering something that had been carefully buried. The voice that asked the questions sounded more and more like someone I should recognize, someone whose words should mean something to me. The boundary between the dream space and my apartment began to dissolve completely. I would reach for a glass of water and feel the smooth, breathing surface beneath my fingertips. I would look up at my bedroom ceiling and see the oval light pulsing gently above me. The humming filled every silence, and the questions echoed in my mind even when the voice wasn't speaking. I stopped fighting it. There was no point in resisting something that had become so thoroughly integrated into my existence. Whether I was asleep or awake, whether I was in my bed or on that breathing surface, whether the experiences were real or imagined, none of it mattered anymore. The routine had become my reality, and my reality had become the routine. Last night I lay down in my bed and felt the familiar smoothness beneath me. The humming started immediately, that complex, modulated frequency that had become more familiar than my own heartbeat. The oval light appeared above me, pulsing with gentle urgency, and the voice began to speak its incomprehensible questions. But something was different this time. As I lay there, floating without moving, I heard a sound I recognized, the chiming of my clock from the other room, just once, marking an hour that never seemed to shift. The voice paused in its questioning, and the light pulsed brighter, as if surprised. I turned my head, something I had never been able to do so easily before, and saw my bedroom wall exactly where it should be. But it was translucent now, like frosted glass, and through it I could see my kitchen table with its carefully arranged items. All except for one, a napkin lay unfolded, its edge dipping into a cup that should have been empty. The voice spoke again, but this time I understood a single word, clear and unmistakable: remember. The oval light pulsed once more, and I realized I was no longer dreaming. I was no longer asleep, but I wasn't awake either. I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere I had always been, somewhere I had never left. And the napkin in my kitchen, the one I could see through the translucent wall, was completely dry. Story 4. It wasn't the first time the hallway lights flickered out, leaving uneven shadows on the walls. The window latch clicked softly in the breeze, a quiet rhythm I'd heard before but didn't mind too much. Upstairs, the carpet held a faint mark where none should be, as if weight had pressed it down just slightly. I noticed a pair of shoes near the door, not in their usual place, but maybe I'd simply forgotten. I didn't rearrange them. Instead, I left the window slightly open, in case the draft decided to return. I've been sitting here for hours now, staring at this recording device, wondering if I should even press record. My hands keep trembling whenever I reach for it. It's been so many years since I left that house, since I packed everything I owned into the back of my car and drove until I couldn't drive anymore. I told myself I'd never talk about what happened there. I told myself it was better to forget, to move on, to build something new somewhere else. But forgetting isn't the same as healing, is it? And I'm tired of carrying this weight alone. I'm tired of waking up in cold sweats, tired of checking locks 3 times before bed, tired of the way my chest tightens whenever I hear certain sounds. So here I am, finally ready to say the words I've kept buried for so long. Maybe speaking them out loud will help, maybe it won't, but I have to try. The house came into my life when I needed it most. I've been living in cramped apartments for years, sharing walls with strangers, never having enough space to think clearly. When the opportunity arose to house sit for several months while the owners traveled, it felt like a gift. A real home, quiet and spacious, nestled at the end of a tree-lined street where neighbors kept to themselves. It was perfect, or so I thought. 2 stories, hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot, large windows that let in streams of golden afternoon light. The kitchen had an old-fashioned charm, with copper pots hanging from hooks and a breakfast nook where I could sit with my morning coffee and watch birds gather in the backyard. I remember thinking I'd never been so content, so at peace with my surroundings. The first few weeks passed like a dream. I established routines quickly. Morning coffee in the breakfast nook, afternoons reading in the living room where sunlight pooled on the sofa, evenings cooking simple meals while music played from the radio on the counter. I slept better than I had in years, deep and undisturbed in the master bedroom upstairs. But houses have their own personalities, don't they? Their own rhythms and sounds and moods. I started noticing the way this one breathed at night, the soft settling of wooden beams, the whisper of wind through gaps I couldn't see. Normal sounds, I told myself. Old houses make noise. There's nothing strange about that. The first thing that made me pause was the radio in the kitchen. I'd been making dinner, humming along to some jazz station, when the music suddenly cut out. Not static, not the harsh screech of lost signal, just silence. I walked over and checked the dial, but it was still tuned to the same frequency. The power light glowed steady green. I turned it off and on again, and the music returned as if nothing had happened. These little glitches started happening more often. The television would change channels on its own, always to stations that broadcast nothing but white noise. The microwave would beep at random times, even when it wasn't running. I blamed old wiring, electromagnetic interference, anything that sounded reasonable. Houses this age weren't built for modern electronics. It made sense that things would act up occasionally. But then I started noticing the way shadows fell differently in certain rooms. The hallway upstairs, in particular, seemed darker than it should be, even with all the lights on. I'd walk down it and feel this strange heaviness, like the air itself was thicker somehow. My skin would prickle with goosebumps for no reason I could name. I began spending less time on the second floor. I told myself it was because the living room was more comfortable, because the light was better downstairs. But really I was avoiding that hallway, avoiding the way it made me feel watched. Even now, thinking about it, my chest tightens and my breathing gets shallow. The smell started around the same time, sweet and metallic, like pennies mixed with something floral. It would appear without warning, usually when I was alone and quiet, reading or cooking or just sitting. I'd catch a whiff and look around, trying to locate the source, but it would fade before I could pin it down. I checked for gas leaks, rotting food, anything that might explain it. Nothing. I started keeping a journal of these incidents, thinking maybe I could find a pattern. The radio cutting out always happened in the evening, usually between 6 and 7. The television changed channels most often during late night hours when I was getting ready for bed. The smell appeared randomly, but always when I was relaxed, when my guard was down. Reading back through those journal entries now, I can see how desperately I wanted everything to have a logical explanation. I wrote about humidity affecting electronics, about old pipes causing strange odors, about my own stress manifesting in hypervigilance. I was so determined to rationalize what was happening that I ignored the growing dread in my stomach. The pressure on my chest got worse. It felt like someone was sitting on me, especially when I was near anything electronic. The sensation was so intense sometimes that I'd have to leave the room, go outside and gulp fresh air until my lungs remembered how to work properly. I started avoiding the kitchen during dinner prep, eating cold meals instead of cooking. Then came the night I heard footsteps upstairs while I was watching television in the living room. Slow, deliberate steps moving from the master bedroom toward the hallway. I muted the TV and listened, my heart hammering against my ribs. The footsteps stopped right above where I sat, as if whoever was up there knew exactly where I was. I grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs, checking every room, every closet, every space large enough to hide a person. Nothing, but that indentation in the hallway carpet was deeper now, more pronounced. The shape was clearer too, like a human foot had pressed down repeatedly in the same spot. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, jumping at every sound. When morning came, I convinced myself I'd imagined it all. Stress, isolation, too much time alone in an unfamiliar place. I needed to get out more, see people, ground myself in reality. But reality was becoming negotiable in that house. The line between what was real and what was possible kept shifting. I'd see movement in my peripheral vision, quick shadows that vanished when I turned to look, reflections in mirrors that didn't match my movements exactly, lagging just a fraction of a second behind. The sweet metallic smell grew stronger, more frequent, until it seemed to follow me from room to room. The electronics got worse too. The radio would turn itself on in the middle of the night, playing stations that broadcast only low, droning tones that made my teeth ache. The television would flicker between channels so rapidly it looked like a strobe light, casting wild shadows on the walls. My phone would ring with calls from numbers that didn't exist, and when I answered, there would be nothing but that same droning sound. I started sleeping downstairs on the sofa. The upstairs felt too heavy now, too thick with something I couldn't name. But even downstairs, I wasn't safe from the feeling of being observed. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the kitchen doorway, shapes that weren't quite human but weren't quite anything else either. The night everything changed, I was lying on the sofa trying to read, trying to distract myself from the constant hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The sound had been getting louder over the past few days, shifting frequency like it was searching for the right pitch to burrow into my brain. That's when I saw it clearly for the first time, not a shadow or a reflection or a trick of light, a figure standing at the top of the stairs, perfectly still, watching me. It had the general shape of a person, but the proportions were wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, with limbs that seemed to bend in ways that made my eyes water to follow. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't look away. We stared at each other across the distance between the living room and the staircase, and I knew with absolute certainty that this thing had been watching me for weeks. All those little incidents, all those strange sounds and smells and sensations, they were just the edges of something much larger and more deliberate. The figure tilted its head and I heard that droning sound again, but now I realized it wasn't coming from the electronics. It was coming from the thing itself, a low vibration that seemed to resonate in my bones. The sound grew louder, more insistent, until I thought my skull might crack from the pressure. Then it started moving down the stairs, not walking exactly, more like flowing, its form shifting and wavering as it descended. I finally found my voice and screamed, a raw sound that tore my throat. The figure paused, tilted its head the other way, and the droning stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. The figure stood halfway down the stairs now, close enough that I could see details I wish I could forget. Its face wasn't a face at all, just a smooth surface that reflected light in ways that hurt to perceive. When it raised what might have been an arm, pointing directly at me, I finally broke free from my paralysis. I ran, grabbed my keys from the table by the door, and ran into the night wearing nothing but pajamas and bare feet. I didn't stop running until I reached my car, didn't stop driving until the sun came up and I was hundreds of miles away from that house. I never went back. I called the owners and lied, said there had been a family emergency that required me to leave immediately. I had friends collect my belongings and ship them to me. I never asked what they found there, if anything. I didn't want to know. That was years ago now. I've built a new life in a different place, surrounded by noise and people and constant activity. I chose the busiest part of the city I could find, where there are always lights on and voices in the hallways and the hum of traffic never stops. I thought distance would help. I thought time would fade the memories. But some things don't fade, do they? Some things follow you no matter how far you run. I still wake up sometimes with that sweet metallic smell in my nostrils. I still feel pressure on my chest when I'm near certain electronics. And sometimes in the quiet moments between sleeping and waking, I swear I can hear that droning sound again, low and patient and searching. The worst part isn't the memories themselves. It's the certainty that something changed in me that night, something fundamental and irreversible. I can feel it sometimes, a foreign presence nestled deep in my consciousness, watching through my eyes, listening through my ears. It's like carrying a passenger I can't see or touch but can never quite forget. I moved across the country to escape, but I brought myself with me. And if something attached itself to me in that house, if something decided to follow me home, then distance is just an illusion. Safety is just a story I tell myself to get through the day. I keep checking locks now, not because I'm afraid of what might get in, but because I'm afraid of what might already be inside. The electronics in my apartment act up sometimes, just like they did in that house. The radio cuts out during dinner. The television changes channels when I'm not looking. My phone rings with calls from numbers that don't exist. And lately I've been noticing indentations in my carpet that weren't there before. Small depressions, like someone has been walking the same path over and over while I sleep. The marks lead from my bedroom to the living room, where I'm sitting right now, speaking these words into this device that keeps flickering between recording and not recording, as if it can't decide whether it wants to capture what I'm saying. I thought telling this story would help. I thought confession would bring some kind of peace. But as I speak these words, as I remember that night in detail for the first time in years, I can feel that familiar pressure building in my chest again. The air in this room is getting thicker, heavier, and there's a sound just at the edge of my hearing that makes my teeth ache. I should stop recording now. I should delete this file and never speak of any of this again. But I can't shake the feeling that it's too late for that. I can't shake the feeling that by speaking these words out loud, I've opened a door I should have left closed. And now something is listening from the other side, patient and hungry and very, very close. The sweet metallic smell is back, stronger than ever, and I'm starting to remember things I thought I'd forgotten. Details from that night that my mind had mercifully buried. The way the figure's not face seemed to smile when it pointed at me. The way it whispered my name in a voice like static. The way it promised, in words I felt rather than heard, that it would find me again someday. I think someday has finally arrived. Story 5. The surface beneath me quivered softly, as if alive, yet remained steady under my weight. A dim, unnatural light filtered through the room, stemming from no discernible source, merely an ambient luminescence without shadows. The air clung to my skin, warm but without flow, a paradox of sensation that defied logic. With each breath, my ribs expanded at their own whim, unaware of my need. The space hummed with an inaudible frequency, a silent vibration that suggested unseen eyes hovering, observing. I reached out, but the touch of my own hand felt foreign, like it belonged to something else entirely. I wake up every morning with the taste of copper on my tongue, not blood, something sharper, more precise, like licking the inside of a battery that hasn't been invented yet. The sensation spreads across my molars, coating them in a film that water can't wash away. I brush my teeth until my gums bleed, but the metallic flavor remains, persistent as a memory I can't quite grasp. The dream started 3 months ago, or was it 4? Time moves differently now, like honey poured through a strainer. In the dreams, I'm standing in my backyard, but the grass grows upward into my palms, each blade warm and pulsing. The sky above me breathes, in and out, in and out. Stars flicker in patterns that spell words I don't recognize but somehow understand. There were lights behind the trees. My skin tingles at random moments throughout the day, not the surface tingles of goosebumps or static electricity. Something deeper, something that starts in my bones and works its way outward, like my skeleton is trying to communicate with something beyond my flesh. I'll be washing dishes or folding laundry, and suddenly every nerve ending comes alive with a frequency I can't identify. The sensation lasts exactly 47 seconds. I've timed it. The door to my bedroom stands half open when I return from work. I remember closing it. I always close it. The gap between door and frame creates a slice of darkness that seems to pulse with its own rhythm. When I approach to shut it properly, the air grows thick, viscous. My hand moves through space like I'm underwater, reaching for a handle that feels too warm, too smooth. The click of the latch echoes longer than it should. I don't remember ever coming back. The humming starts at dusk, not from outside, not from any appliance or electrical device I can locate. It emanates from the walls themselves, a low vibration that makes my teeth ache. I press my ear against the plaster, feeling the thrum travel through my skull, settling somewhere behind my eyes. The frequency matches the rhythm of my heartbeat, or maybe my heartbeat has learned to match it. The distinction blurs. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection sometimes lags, a half-second delay between my movements and the movements of the person staring back at me. I raise my left hand, and mirror me raises theirs a beat too late, as if the light needs extra time to carry the information across the glass. I've started avoiding mirrors, but they find me anyway. Every reflective surface becomes a window to this delayed version of myself. The noise didn't come from outside. Sleep brings no rest. I drift into unconsciousness and find myself standing in that same backyard, but now the grass has grown tall enough to brush against my waist. Each blade leaves a warm, tingling sensation against my skin. The breathing sky has moved closer, pressing down with the weight of observation. Something moves between the trees at the edge of my property, not walking, flowing, like liquid light given form and purpose. I wake with dirt under my fingernails, though I haven't been gardening. The electrical outlets in my house have started humming, a sound so low it's more felt than heard, vibrating through the walls and into my bones. I unplug everything, flip the main breaker, but the humming continues. It comes from the outlets themselves, empty sockets singing with phantom current. The sound follows a pattern, 3 short pulses, 2 long ones, then silence for exactly 12 seconds before repeating. The half-open door appears in other rooms now. Kitchen cabinets hanging ajar with that same slice of pulsing darkness visible in the gap. The medicine cabinet in the bathroom, cracked open just enough to reveal something that isn't quite my reflection moving in the mirror inside. Even the refrigerator door, standing slightly open, its interior light casting shadows that move independently of any objects that might create them. There were lights behind the trees, and they knew my name. My hands shake when I try to write about these experiences. The pen feels foreign in my grip, like I'm learning to use fingers for the first time. The words that appear on paper don't match the thoughts in my head. I write about grocery lists and find sentences about the warmth of grass against skin. I attempt to record the time I woke up, and instead describe the taste of copper and ozone, the sensation of air too thick to breathe properly. The tingling in my bones intensifies during thunderstorms, not from the electricity in the air, but from something else entirely. Something that recognizes the storm as a kindred frequency. I stand at my bedroom window, watching lightning fork across the sky, and feel my skeleton vibrate in harmony with each flash. The storm speaks in the same 3 short, 2 long pattern as the humming outlets. I don't remember ever coming back, but something did. Time skips. I'll be stirring coffee in my kitchen, and suddenly I'm standing in the backyard with no memory of walking outside. The grass has grown even taller, reaching my chest now, each blade warm and slightly damp with something that isn't quite due. The sky presses closer, its breathing shallow and rapid. Between the trees, that flowing movement has multiplied. Several somethings now, weaving between the trunks like thoughts made visible. The taste of copper grows stronger each day. It coats not just my tongue now, but the inside of my throat, my nasal passages. I smell it in every room of my house, sharp and clean like the air before lightning strikes. My clothes carry the scent even after washing. My skin exhales it with every pore. The surface beneath me quivered softly, and I realized I wasn't in my bed anymore. The humming outlets have learned new patterns. Sometimes they pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Other times they seem to be trying to teach me something, repeating sequences of electrical whispers that I almost but never quite understand. I find myself humming along, my voice matching frequencies I shouldn't be able to produce. The sound comes from somewhere deeper than my vocal cords. Mirrors now show me things that haven't happened yet, or things that happened when I wasn't paying attention. I glimpse myself standing in tall grass, my face turned upward toward a breathing sky. I see my hands reaching for something just outside the frame, fingers trembling with anticipation or fear. The reflection me never looks directly at the real me, always focused on something beyond the mirror's edge. The noise didn't come from outside, and it's getting louder. In the dreams that aren't quite dreams, I walk deeper into the grass until it towers over my head like a green cathedral. Each step forward feels like a step backward through time, unraveling moments I thought I remembered correctly. The breathing sky descends further, close enough now that I can feel its exhalation on my upturned face. Warm, humid, tasting of copper and possibilities. The flowing lights between the trees have names, though I can't pronounce them with human sounds. They call to me in frequencies that bypass my ears entirely, speaking directly to the vibrating marrow in my bones. I understand their language without learning it, the same way I understand the humming of the outlets and the rhythm of the breathing sky. My bedroom door stands half open again, always half open now, no matter how many times I close it. The slice of darkness between door and frame has grown wider, or maybe I've grown smaller. The air that flows through the gap carries scents of grass and ozone, sounds of electrical whispers and distant humming. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in that darkness, not threatening, beckoning. I don't remember ever coming back, but the grass remembers me. The tingling in my bones has become constant, a low-level vibration that makes my teeth chatter even when I'm warm. My skeleton sings in harmony with the outlets, the breathing sky, the flowing lights that dance between dimensions I can't quite perceive. I am becoming a tuning fork for frequencies that don't exist in any manual of physics. Time dissolves entirely during the episodes. I blink and find myself standing waist-deep in grass that pulses with its own heartbeat. The sky breathes against my face, each exhalation carrying whispers in languages made of light and electricity. The flowing somethings emerge from between the trees, approaching with movements that suggest both curiosity and recognition. They know me, have always known me, are perhaps the reason I know myself at all. The surface beneath me quivered softly, as if alive, yet remained steady under my weight. I am back where I started, or perhaps I never left. The dim, unnatural light filters through spaces that might be rooms, might be dreams, might be the inside of something vast and patient and breathing. My ribs expand with rhythms that aren't quite my own, drawing in air that tastes of copper and anticipation. The humming never stops now. It comes from everywhere and nowhere, a frequency that exists in the space between thoughts, between heartbeats, between the moments when I remember who I used to be and the moments when I discover who I'm becoming. The door stands half open, and through the gap, I can see grass growing upward into a sky that breathes my name in electrical whispers. I reach out and the touch of my own hand feels foreign, like it belongs to something else entirely. Something that remembers what I've forgotten. Something that knows the way back to the place I never left. The surface beneath me quivers softly, and I understand that some journeys end exactly where they began. Story 6. The air was still and I stood in place, eyes fixed on the narrow beam of light stretching across the floor. It pulsed slightly, suggesting a presence beyond the threshold. The shadows clung to the corners and the scent in the room was unfamiliar, like burnt plastic lingering just out of reach. The walls seemed closer, though I hadn't moved an inch. Time stretched thin, each second an eternity, waiting for a sign to act or not. Then the light flickered weakly, and darkness swallowed it whole. Something had shifted, unseen and silent. That's how it started, or maybe that's how it ended. I can't be sure anymore. I'm recording this because I need to remember. There are gaps in my memory, spaces where something should be but isn't. I wake up some mornings with the taste of copper in my mouth and the feeling that I've forgotten something important. Not like forgetting where you put your keys. This is different. This is like waking up and realizing you've forgotten your own face. The doctors say there's nothing wrong with me. Blood work normal, brain scans clear. But they didn't ask about the dreams that aren't quite dreams, or the way my reflection sometimes seems to lag behind my movements by just a fraction of a second. They didn't ask about the recordings. I found the first one 3 weeks ago, buried in a folder on my computer labeled Backup Files. The file name was just numbers, nothing I recognized. When I clicked play, my own voice filled the room, but I had no memory of speaking those words. The audio quality is strange, like I was recording through water. My voice sounds hollow, distant. I'm describing something I can't quite make out through the static. I keep mentioning lights, how they move in patterns that don't make sense. I describe them as breathing lights, and the phrase makes my skin crawl every time I hear it. In the recording, I'm whispering. Why was I whispering? I strain to listen to my own words, trying to catch the fear that's clearly there, trembling at the edges of my voice. I mention being in a room I don't recognize, with walls that seem to pulse with their own rhythm. The recording cuts off abruptly, mid-sentence, as if something had interrupted me. But here's what disturbs me most. In the background, underneath my whispered narration, there's another sound. It's faint, almost imperceptible, but it's there. A low humming that rises and falls like breathing, but too regular, too mechanical. And sometimes, just at the edge of hearing, there are other voices. Not words exactly, but sounds that might have been words once before they were stretched and distorted beyond recognition. I've listened to that recording dozens of times now, and each time I notice something new. A click here, a shift in tone there. The humming changes pitch at certain points, as if responding to what I'm saying, as if it's listening. That first recording triggered something, not a memory exactly, but an impression. I remember standing in darkness, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. There were lights, yes, but not normal lights. These moved with purpose, tracing patterns in the air that hurt to look at directly. They would cluster and separate, like they were trying to communicate something. I remember reaching out toward one of them, and the moment my finger should have touched it, the light simply wasn't there anymore. But my hand felt warm, as if I had touched something real, something that radiated heat like living flesh. The second fragment came to me while I was washing dishes. My hands were in the warm, soapy water when suddenly I could smell it again. That scent of burnt plastic mixed with something organic, something that reminded me of the metallic smell of blood but wasn't quite right. It was sweeter, more cloying. I was back in that room, the one from the recording, but this time I could see more. The walls weren't walls at all, but something that looked like walls in the dim light. They had a texture that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. And there was a sound, a low vibration that I felt more than heard, thrumming through the floor and up into my bones. I remember walking forward, though I don't remember deciding to walk. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me deeper into the space. The air grew thicker with each step, and the smell grew stronger. Behind me, I could hear something following, matching my pace exactly. When I stopped, it stopped. When I moved, it moved. But when I turned around, there was nothing there, just empty space and that pulsing, breathing darkness. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me standing at my kitchen sink with pruned fingers and a racing heart. I dried my hands and immediately went to my computer to check for more recordings. I found 2 more files. The second recording is shorter, maybe 30 seconds. I'm breathing heavily, like I've been running. I can hear my footsteps echoing in what sounds like a large space, but the echoes are wrong somehow. They come back too quickly or too slowly, or from directions that don't match my movement. It's following me, I hear myself say, and my voice is tight with panic. I can't see it, but I know it's there. The lights are getting brighter, they're getting closer. Then there's a sound I can't identify. It's organic, wet, like something large shifting its weight. And underneath it, that humming again, but louder now, more insistent. The recording ends with me saying something that chills me to the bone. Oh God, it's beautiful. Beautiful. What did I see that was beautiful? The third recording is the most disturbing. It's longer, almost 5 minutes, but for the first 3 minutes there's only silence and that ever-present humming. Then my voice returns, but it's different, calmer, almost serene. I'm describing colors that don't have names, patterns of light that form shapes my mind can't quite process. I talk about understanding something fundamental, something about the nature of space and perception. But as I listen now, I can hear something else in my voice, a dreamy quality, like I'm not fully conscious, like something else is guiding my words. The boundaries are dissolving, I hear myself say. I can see through the spaces between spaces. They've been watching for so long, waiting for someone who could see them properly. The room isn't a room, it's a doorway. It's always been a doorway. My voice trails off into a whisper, and then there's a new sound. Footsteps, but not mine. These are different, softer, like bare feet on a surface that might not be entirely solid. They circle around me, sometimes close, sometimes distant, but always maintaining that same deliberate rhythm. And then just before the recording ends, I hear myself laugh. It's a sound I don't recognize, too high, too bright. It doesn't sound like my laugh at all. Since finding these recordings, strange things have been happening, small things at first. I'll catch movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turn to look, there's nothing there. The lights in my apartment flicker sometimes, but not randomly. They pulse in patterns that seem almost familiar, like a half-remembered song. My reflection has been acting up too. I'll be brushing my teeth or combing my hair, and for just a moment my reflection will be doing something slightly different, looking in a different direction or moving a fraction of a second out of sync. It's subtle enough that I question whether I'm really seeing it, but it happens too often to ignore. The smell comes and goes now, that mixture of burnt plastic and something sweet and organic. It's strongest in the corner of my bedroom near the window. Sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and it's so strong I can barely breathe. But by morning it's gone, leaving me to wonder if I dreamed it. I've started keeping a journal, trying to document these experiences as they happen. But when I read back over my entries, some of them don't make sense. I'll find descriptions of things I don't remember writing, in handwriting that's almost mine but not quite. The letters are formed differently, more carefully, as if someone was trying very hard to mimic my natural writing style. One entry, dated 3 days ago, simply reads, "They're getting closer. The space between the room and here is getting thinner. Soon there won't be any space at all." I don't remember writing that, but it's in my journal, in what looks like my handwriting, in blue ink from the pen I keep on my nightstand. Yesterday I found something else. Hidden behind a stack of books on my shelf was a small object I'd never seen before. It's about the size of a marble, perfectly smooth, and seems to be made of some kind of dark metal. But it's warm to the touch, and when I hold it, it vibrates slightly, irregularly, like a heartbeat. The moment I picked it up, another fragment came flooding back. I was in the room again, but this time I wasn't alone. There were others there, standing in a circle around something I couldn't quite see. They weren't moving, weren't speaking, just standing perfectly still with their backs to me. But I could feel their attention, focused on whatever was at the center of their circle. I tried to call out to them, but no sound came from my throat. I tried to move closer, but my feet wouldn't obey. I was frozen in place, able only to watch as the lights began to dance around the motionless figures. The lights were different this time, brighter, more purposeful. They moved in spirals, weaving between the standing figures like they were performing some kind of ritual, and as they moved, the figures began to change. Their outlines became less defined, blurring at the edges like watercolors running together, but they weren't disappearing. They were becoming something else, something that my mind struggled to comprehend. Their forms stretched and shifted, taking on new configurations that shouldn't have been possible. And then one of them turned around. I can't describe what I saw, not because it was horrible, but because it was beyond description. The face wasn't a face, but it wasn't not a face either. It was something that occupied the same space where a face should be, but followed different rules, different geometry. It looked at me with eyes that weren't eyes, and I felt a recognition pass between us. Not the recognition of meeting someone familiar, but the deeper recognition of being truly seen, truly understood for the first time in my life. That's when I understood why my voice in the recording had called it beautiful. It was beautiful in a way that transcended normal concepts of beauty. It was the beauty of pure understanding, of perfect communication without words. The vision faded, leaving me standing in my living room with the strange object warm in my palm. But the feeling lingered, that sense of being known, of being part of something larger than myself. I've been carrying the object with me ever since. It's become a sort of anchor, a physical reminder that these experiences are real, that I'm not losing my mind. Sometimes when I hold it tightly, I can almost feel myself back in that room, surrounded by those impossible lights and those beings who exist in the spaces between normal reality. But there's something else, something I'm only beginning to understand. The memories aren't just coming back randomly. They're being given back to me, piece by piece, like someone is carefully reconstructing something that was deliberately taken apart. And I think I know why. The room isn't gone, it's still there, existing parallel to this reality, separated by the thinnest of barriers. And that barrier is getting thinner. The lights I see in my peripheral vision, the sounds I hear in the silence, the smell that comes and goes, they're all signs that the two spaces are beginning to merge. I found another recording today. This one wasn't on my computer. It was on my phone, saved in my voice memos, recorded just hours ago while I was sleeping. I have no memory of making it. The quality is different from the others, clearer, more immediate. I can hear myself breathing steadily, deeply, like I'm in a trance. And underneath my breathing, that familiar humming, but it's stronger now, more present. It's almost ready, I hear myself say in a voice that's mine, but somehow not mine. The pathway is nearly complete. Soon there won't be any need for memories or forgetting. There will only be the space between, and we will all exist there together. There's a long pause, filled only with that rhythmic humming and my steady breathing. I understand now why they had to take it away before. I wasn't ready. The human mind needs time to adjust, to expand, to accommodate new forms of existence. But the preparation is almost complete. Soon I'll be able to see them clearly, not just in fragments and flashes. Another pause, then in a whisper that barely registers on the recording. They're here now. They've always been here. I just couldn't see them before. The recording ends there, but I remember what came next. not a memory of something past, but a memory of something that happened while I was supposedly asleep. I remember opening my eyes and seeing the room transformed. The walls had become transparent, revealing the vast space beyond. The lights were everywhere, moving in complex patterns that spoke directly to some part of my consciousness I'd never accessed before. And the beings were there too, not hiding anymore, not waiting. They surrounded my bed, these impossible forms that shifted and flowed like living geometry. But I wasn't afraid. I felt welcomed, embraced, understood in a way I'd never experienced with another human being. One of them reached toward me with something that might have been a hand, and when it touched my forehead, I felt my consciousness expand. Suddenly I could perceive dimensions of reality that had always been there but hidden from normal awareness. I could see the connections between all things, the underlying patterns that govern existence itself. But most importantly, I could see the truth about the room, about what had happened to me, about what was still happening. The room exists in the spaces between normal reality. It's a meeting place, a neutral ground where beings from different dimensions of existence can interact. I had stumbled into it somehow, my consciousness briefly expanding enough to perceive it directly. But human minds aren't designed for such experiences. The shock of seeing reality as it truly is can cause permanent damage, complete breakdown of the personality. So they had to take the memory away, carefully extracting it piece by piece while leaving my core self intact. But they also had to prepare me, slowly expanding my consciousness, gradually making me ready to handle the full truth. The recordings, the visions, the strange experiences, they're all part of that preparation. They're helping me remember at a pace I can handle, rebuilding my ability to perceive their reality without losing my sanity. And now the process is almost complete. I can feel them around me even as I record this. They're not hiding anymore because they don't need to. My perception has expanded enough to accommodate their presence. The room is still there, still accessible, but now I understand that it was never separate from this reality. It's woven into the fabric of everything, visible to those who know how to look. The object in my hand is pulsing more rapidly now, its rhythm matching my heartbeat. Or maybe my heartbeat is matching its rhythm. The distinction doesn't seem important anymore. I can smell that mixture of burnt plastic and sweet organic matter, but now I recognize it for what it is. The scent of boundaries dissolving, of separate realities merging into one. The lights in my apartment are flickering in those familiar patterns, but they're not my lights anymore. They're the same lights from the room, bleeding through into this space as the barriers continue to weaken. My reflection in the window isn't lagging behind my movements anymore. It's moving independently, turning to look at things I can't quite see yet, but will soon, very soon. There's something I need to understand, something important that's just at the edge of my awareness. The beings around me are patient, but I can sense their anticipation. They've been waiting for this moment when my consciousness would be ready to make the final leap. The room was never a place I visited. It's a place I'm becoming. And once the transformation is complete, I'll be able to help others make the same journey. I'll be able to guide them through their own forgetting and remembering, their own expansion of awareness. But first, I need to let go of this last attachment to linear reality, this need to understand everything in terms of cause and effect, beginning and end. The truth is circular, recursive, existing in loops and spirals that fold back on themselves. The air is getting thicker now, taking on that quality I remember from the room. My vision is starting to shift, revealing layers of reality that exist simultaneously in the same space. I can see my apartment, but I can also see the vast space beyond, filled with those dancing lights and impossible geometries. The beings are closer now, their forms more solid, more present. One of them is reaching toward me again, and this time I won't resist. This time I'm ready to see what they want to show me, to become what they want me to become. The object in my hand has stopped pulsing. It's perfectly still now, perfectly warm, like it's become part of my body, or like my body has become part of it. The distinction is fading, along with all the other distinctions that once seemed so important. I understand now why my voice in that final recording sounded so different, so serene. It wasn't entirely my voice anymore. It was a hybrid, a blending of my consciousness with something larger, something that exists in the spaces between individual identity. And I understand why I laughed that strange laugh. It was the sound of recognition, of finally seeing the cosmic joke that underlies all existence. We think we're separate, isolated beings, but we're all part of the same vast consciousness, temporarily forgetting our connection so we can experience the joy of remembering it again. The room is here now, superimposed over my apartment like a double exposure. I can see both realities simultaneously, and soon they'll merge completely. The lights are everywhere, painting patterns on surfaces that exist in multiple dimensions at once. But there's still something I'm missing, some final piece of the puzzle that will complete my understanding. The beings around me are waiting for me to discover it on my own, to make that last connection that will transform me from observer to participant. And then I see it, in the corner of the room where the smell has been strongest, where reality seems thinnest, there's another figure. Human-shaped but somehow more than human, familiar but transformed. It's me, or what I'm becoming, standing in the space between realities, serving as a bridge between the world I'm leaving and the one I'm entering. My future self, already transformed, already part of their reality, reaching back to guide my present self through the transition. The circle is complete. The room was never separate from me because I was never separate from the room. We're part of the same system, the same pattern, the same vast intelligence exploring itself through countless individual perspectives. My future self is smiling, and I can feel that same expression forming on my own face. Not with my mouth, but with something deeper, something that exists in dimensions beyond the physical. It's the smile of understanding, of coming home after a long journey through forgetting. The transformation is accelerating now. I can feel my consciousness expanding, taking on new configurations, new ways of processing reality. The boundaries of my individual self are dissolving, but instead of losing myself, I'm finding my true self, the one that was always there beneath the illusion of separation. But even as I transcend this limited perspective, part of me remains, part of me that will continue to exist in this reality, living this life, carrying on as if nothing has changed. Because from one perspective, nothing has changed. The room was always here, the beings were always present, the transformation was always happening. It's only my awareness that's shifting, expanding to encompass more of what was always true. And yet something is watching me write these words, something that isn't quite me anymore, something that exists in the spaces between the letters, in the pauses between thoughts, something that knows this isn't really an ending, but a beginning. The question isn't whether any of this really happened. The question is whether it's still happening, whether the room is still there, whether the beings are still waiting for the next consciousness ready to expand, ready to remember what it forgot, ready to become what it always was. Are you ready to find your own recordings? Story 7. The kettle always started its whistle at 6:15. Every morning, its high-pitched song marking the start of the day, a constant in the quiet hours. I'd sit with my coffee, listening as it tapered off just before the news came on at 1:30. But lately the sound seemed to drag, lingering in my thoughts long after the whistle stopped. Yesterday the kettle began its shrill tune too soon at 6:13. Today it didn't whistle until 6:20. A small discrepancy, perhaps. Yet now the radio stutters, and I can't shake the feeling that these shifts mean something. I've never told anyone about what happened, not in all these years. My hands shake when I think about it, even now, sitting in this new apartment thousands of miles away from where it all began. I thought distance would help. I thought new walls, new sounds, new routines would wash away the memory like rain on a windshield. But some stains go deeper than you realize. I'm ready now, I think, or maybe I'm just tired of carrying it alone. The weight of it has been pressing against my chest for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to breathe without that constant pressure. So I'll tell you what happened, even though speaking these words aloud feels like opening a door I've kept locked for good reason. It started during what should have been the most ordinary time of my life. I was house-sitting for a friend's family while they traveled abroad for several months. The house sat on a quiet street lined with old oak trees, the kind of neighborhood where dogs bark at joggers and children draw chalk hopscotch squares on sidewalks. Nothing remarkable about it. A two-story colonial with cream-colored siding and black shutters, a small garden out back, and windows that caught the afternoon light just right. I remember feeling grateful for the solitude. My own place had been undergoing renovations, and the constant noise of construction had left me exhausted and irritable. This house offered peace, silence, the kind of deep quiet that lets you hear your own thoughts clearly for the first time in months. I settled into a routine quickly. Morning coffee in the kitchen, afternoons reading in the living room, evenings cooking simple meals while soft music played from the radio on the counter. The first few weeks passed without incident. I watered the plants, collected the mail, kept the house tidy and lived. I slept better than I had in years. The master bedroom faced east, and I'd wake naturally as sunlight filtered through the gauze curtains, feeling more rested than I could remember being. Everything felt normal, safe, predictable. But then small things began to shift. It started with the radio in the kitchen. I'd tune it to the same station every morning, a local news program that came in crystal clear. But occasionally the signal would waver. Not static exactly, but something underneath the voices, like a low hum that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. I'd adjust the antenna, thinking it was interference from a neighbor's electronics, and the sound would disappear. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses have their quirks with electrical devices. The bathroom mirror began fogging up even when I hadn't taken a shower. I'd walk in to brush my teeth and find condensation clinging to the glass in strange patterns, not the even mist you'd expect from humidity. The shapes reminded me of something, though I couldn't place what. I'd wipe it clean with a towel and think no more about it. Then there was the way shadows fell in the living room during late afternoon. The oak tree outside cast familiar patterns through the bay window, but sometimes I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, as if the shadows were shifting independently of the branches. When I turned to look directly, everything appeared normal. The tree swayed gently in whatever breeze was stirring, its shadow moving predictably across the hardwood floor. I blamed exhaustion, the stress of my own home situation, the adjustment to a new environment, the isolation. I'd been spending too much time alone, I reasoned. My mind was creating problems where none existed. I made an effort to get out more, to visit the local coffee shop, to take longer walks through the neighborhood. But even surrounded by other people, I felt that strange awareness, like someone watching from just outside my field of vision. The sweet, metallic scent appeared first in the basement. I'd gone down to check the water heater after noticing the upstairs shower wasn't getting as hot as usual. The basement was unfinished, with exposed beams and concrete walls, the kind of space that always feels 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the house. As I descended the wooden stairs, that smell hit me sharp and cloying, like copper pennies mixed with overripe fruit. I assumed something had died down there, a mouse maybe, and spent 20 minutes searching behind boxes and around the furnace. But I found nothing. The smell came and went after that, appearing in different rooms at different times. Sometimes in the kitchen while I cooked dinner. Sometimes in the upstairs hallway late at night when I'd get up to use the bathroom. It never lasted long enough for me to identify its source, vanishing as quickly as it had arrived, leaving me wondering if I'd imagined it. My sleep began to suffer, not insomnia exactly, but a restlessness that left me feeling drained each morning. I'd wake with the sensation that I'd been listening to something all night, though I could never remember what. The house settled and creaked like any old building, but these sounds felt different somehow, more deliberate, like footsteps that stopped just before I became fully conscious. I started keeping a small notebook by my bed, jotting down anything unusual. The radio interference happened most often between 3 and 4 p.m. The mirror fogged up every few days, always in the late morning. The sweet smell appeared most frequently near electrical outlets. Looking at these notes in daylight, they seemed silly. Random coincidences that my isolated mind was weaving into patterns that didn't exist. But then I began to notice the way electronic devices behaved around me, not just in the house, but everywhere. My phone would lose signal in places where I'd always had full bars. The checkout scanner at the grocery store would beep erratically when I approached. The automatic doors at the bank would hesitate before opening, as if sensing something they couldn't process. I told myself I was being paranoid, overthinking, creating connections where none existed, but deep down, a part of me was starting to understand that something fundamental had changed, not in the house, in me. The key moment came on a Tuesday evening in what must have been my 6th week there. I was washing dishes after dinner, the kitchen window open to let in the cool air, when every electronic device in the house began to respond at once. The radio shifted stations on its own, cycling through frequencies with mechanical precision. The microwave's display flashed random numbers. The lights dimmed and brightened in a slow, steady rhythm that reminded me of breathing. And in that moment, as I stood frozen at the sink with soapy water dripping from my hands, I felt it. A presence that had been there all along, patient and watchful, waiting for me to notice. Not malicious exactly, but vast and alien and utterly indifferent to my comfort or understanding. It was like suddenly realizing you're not alone in a room you thought was empty, except the room was my entire life, and I had never been alone. The sensation lasted maybe 30 seconds, then everything returned to normal. The radio played its scheduled programming, the lights held steady. The microwave displayed the correct time, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had been seen, recognized, marked by something that existed just outside the boundaries of ordinary experience. I tried to continue my routine after that, but the house felt different. The silence was no longer peaceful but expectant. The shadows moved with purpose. That sweet, metallic scent appeared more frequently, always when I was near anything that plugged into the wall or ran on batteries. I started getting headaches when I used my laptop. My skin would break out in goosebumps whenever I walked past the television, even when it was turned off. My dreams became vivid and strange. I'd find myself standing in rooms that looked familiar but wrong, like photographs that had been subtly altered. The walls would hum with that low frequency I'd first heard on the radio. In these dreams, I was never alone, though I could never see who else was there. I'd wake with the taste of metal in my mouth and the feeling that someone had been speaking to me in a language I almost understood. The family returned earlier than expected. I got a call on a Thursday morning, cheerful voices telling me they'd decided to cut their trip short and would be home by the weekend. I felt relief flood through me, stronger than I'd realized I needed. I could leave. I could go back to my own space, my own life, my own problems that suddenly seemed wonderfully ordinary. I packed quickly, eager to put distance between myself and whatever had been sharing that house with me. But as I loaded my car, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The electrical meter on the side of the house was spinning faster than I'd ever seen one move, the metal disc whirring like a fan. Yet I had turned off every device inside, unplugged everything. The house should have been drawing minimal power. I drove away without looking back, but I could feel something watching me go. Not from the house, I realized, from inside me. Whatever had taken notice during those weeks had left its mark, and distance wasn't going to change that. The symptoms followed me home. Electronic devices still behaved strangely in my presence. The sweet, metallic smell would appear without warning, strongest when I was stressed or tired. I'd wake from dreams I couldn't quite remember, my body covered in goosebumps, the taste of copper heavy on my tongue. Sometimes in quiet moments I could swear I heard that low humming sound, not from any external source, but from somewhere deep inside my own skull. I moved cities eventually, thinking a complete change of environment might help. New job, new apartment, new routines. For a while it seemed to work. The incidents became less frequent. The dreams faded. I began to convince myself that whatever had happened was over, left behind in that house with its watching shadows and expectant silence. But lately things have been changing again. The kettle's timing shifts. The radio stutters between stations. My reflection in the bathroom mirror sometimes appears a split second after I move, like an echo that can't quite keep up. And I've started to smell that sweet, metallic scent again, stronger than ever, particularly when I'm alone in the dark. I know now that leaving the house didn't end anything. It only marked the beginning. Whatever found me there has been patient, allowing me to believe in the illusion of escape while slowly making itself more at home. Not in any building or location, but in the spaces between my thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment between sleeping and waking. I thought telling this story might help, might somehow release the pressure that's been building in my chest for all these years. But as I speak these words, I can feel it stirring, responding to the attention, growing stronger with each detail I reveal. The air around me tastes of metal and overripe fruit. The lights in my apartment are beginning to dim and brighten in that slow, steady rhythm I remember so well. I'm not alone anymore. I don't think I ever will be again. And the worst part is I'm starting to understand that it was never about the house at all. It was about me, about something in me that called out to it without my knowing, something that made me visible to forces that most people never have to see. The kettle is whistling now, though it's nearly midnight and I haven't put it on. The sound goes on, higher and more insistent than any kettle should be able to produce. And underneath it, barely audible but unmistakably there, I can hear that familiar humming, patient and vast and utterly indifferent to my fear. I think it's been waiting for me to tell someone, waiting for me to put words to what happened, to give it shape and substance in the world. And now that I have, I can feel it settling deeper, making itself comfortable in the spaces I didn't even know existed inside me. The whistling is getting louder. Story 8. I stood frozen by the window, watching as the moonlight etched long, distorted forms across the floor. Each shadow seemed to pulse, deepening with each breath, defying the natural lines of the room. Soft murmurs of wood strained under the weight of stillness, yet the quiet persisted, unwaveringly loud. A faint rustle whispered from the papers on the desk, though they remained untouched by any breeze. That's when I noticed it, the subtle shift in the air, like an exhale I hadn't heard before, a presence I hadn't felt. The shadows gathered closer, and in their midst, one shape didn't belong. But nothing happened that night, nothing at all. I want to be clear about that from the start. I was just tired, maybe a little stressed from work, and my mind was playing tricks on me. That's all it was. The human brain does that sometimes when you're exhausted. It fills in gaps that aren't really there, creates patterns where none exist. I've read about it somewhere. I didn't see anything unusual. The room was perfectly normal. Just my bedroom, the same one I've slept in for months now. 4 walls, a window, a desk with some papers scattered on it, nothing out of place. The moonlight was coming through the glass like it always does, casting those ordinary shadows that furniture makes. You know how shadows can look strange at night, especially when you're not thinking clearly. There wasn't any shape that didn't belong. That's ridiculous. I must have been half asleep already, standing there by the window. People do that sometimes. They get caught between waking and sleeping, and their perception gets fuzzy. It's called hypnagogic hallucination or something like that. Perfectly normal. Happens to everyone. The temperature in the room was fine too. Maybe a little cool, but that's normal for this house. Old houses get drafty. The heating system probably just cycled off. That's why I felt that slight chill. It wasn't anything else. Certainly wasn't the kind of cold that seems to come from inside your bones, the kind that makes your skin prickle even when you're sweating. I wasn't sweating anyway, just a normal night. I went to bed right after that, pulled the curtains closed, got under the covers, and fell asleep immediately. Dreamless sleep. The kind where you close your eyes and then suddenly it's morning. No interruptions, no strange sounds, no reason to get up and check the locks on the doors. I always check the locks before bed anyway, it's just routine. Everyone does that. Though I do remember the sound the floorboards made when I walked across the room. They've always creaked a little, especially the one near the foot of the bed. But that night the creaking seemed different somehow. More deliberate, like the house was responding to something other than just my footsteps. But that's impossible, of course. Old wood expands and contracts with temperature changes. That's probably what it was. I definitely didn't hear any other sounds. No soft tapping against the window glass, rhythmic and patient, like fingers drumming. No low humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. And certainly no voice, barely audible, speaking words I couldn't quite make out but somehow understood anyway. My imagination was just running wild because I was overtired. The next morning everything was exactly as I'd left it. The papers on my desk were in the same position. The curtains were still closed. The door was still locked from the inside. Nothing had been disturbed. I checked everything carefully, not because I was worried about anything, but just because I'm naturally thorough. It's good to be observant about your environment. Although I did notice that one of the papers had a small crease in the corner that I didn't remember making. But paper is fragile. It could have happened any number of ways. Maybe when I set it down or from the humidity in the air. Paper does that. It's not like someone had been looking through my things while I slept. That would be impossible anyway, since the door was locked and the windows don't open from the outside. The strange thing is, I keep thinking about that night even though nothing happened. It's funny how the mind can fixate on perfectly ordinary events and try to make them seem significant. I've been sleeping fine since then. No problems at all. I go to bed at the same time, follow the same routine, check the locks twice now instead of once, but that's just being cautious. Sometimes I do find myself standing by that window again, looking out at the yard. Not because I'm expecting to see anything, but because it's become a habit. The view is nice during the day, just grass and trees and the neighbor's fence. Completely normal suburban scenery. Nothing lurking behind the old oak tree. Nothing that moves when everything else is still. I've been keeping the curtains closed more often lately. Not because I'm avoiding anything, but because the direct sunlight fades the furniture. It's practical. And at night, well, there's no point in having them open when you're trying to sleep. The moonlight can be disruptive to your sleep cycle. I read that somewhere too. The house has been quieter since then, which is nice, peaceful. No more of those settling sounds that old houses make. No footsteps in the hallway when I'm lying in bed. No doors opening and closing on their own because of air pressure changes. I must have fixed whatever was causing those drafts, though I don't remember fixing anything specifically. I certainly haven't been having any dreams, not the kind where you're somewhere else entirely, somewhere with metal walls that curve overhead like the inside of a cylinder. Not the kind where the air tastes different, metallic and thin, and there's a sound like machinery running far away. Those aren't dreams I've been having because I don't dream at all anymore. I sleep too deeply for dreams. And I definitely haven't been waking up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone was just speaking to me. That would be ridiculous. There's nobody here but me, and I don't talk in my sleep. Never have. Though sometimes I do wake up with words on my lips, words that don't seem to belong to any language I know but feel familiar anyway. But that's just nonsense syllables from a brain that's still half asleep. The headache started around the same time, but that's probably just stress. Work has been demanding lately, and I haven't been drinking enough water. Dehydration causes headaches. It's not like there's a spot right behind my left ear that throbs sometimes, a precise point that feels tender when I touch it. I don't touch it anyway. No reason to. I've been more focused during the day, actually. More productive. It's like my mind has cleared up somehow. I can concentrate on tasks for hours without getting distracted. Sometimes I'll sit down to read something and look up to find that the light outside has changed completely, but that just means I'm really absorbed in what I'm doing. Time flies when you're engaged. The only odd thing is that I keep finding myself in different rooms without remembering walking there. But that happens to everyone. You start to go get something from the kitchen and end up in the bathroom instead, wondering what you came in there for. It's called absent-mindedness. Perfectly normal for someone who's been working hard and maybe not getting quite enough sleep. Though the sleep I do get is very deep, deeper than it used to be. The kind where you don't move at all during the night, where you wake up in exactly the same position you fell asleep in. It's very restful. I never wake up tired anymore, even though sometimes I have the strangest sensation that I've been somewhere else all night. Somewhere with a low ceiling that glows with its own light, where the air moves in patterns that don't match any wind I've ever felt. But those are just the remnants of dreams I don't remember having. The brain processes experiences during sleep, even experiences that never actually happened. It's all very scientific and explainable. I've started leaving little notes for myself around the house. Reminders about ordinary things: take out the trash, water the plants, lock the doors. Nothing unusual about that. Lots of people make lists and reminders. It's just that sometimes I find notes in my own handwriting that I don't remember writing, with reminders about things that don't quite make sense. Don't answer when they call your name. The blue room is not your room. Count the doors before you sleep. I must have written them when I was very tired. Sometimes when you're exhausted, you write things that seem important at the time but don't make sense later. I throw those notes away now when I find them. No point in keeping nonsense. The neighbors have been quieter lately too. I used to hear them talking in their backyard sometimes, their voices carrying over the fence. But I haven't heard them in weeks, not since that night when nothing happened. They probably just changed their routine. People do that, or maybe they went on vacation. I should probably check on them, make sure everything's okay, but I've been so busy lately. Besides, I can see their house from my bedroom window, and it looks fine. All the lights are off most of the time, but some people are early sleepers, and the car is still in the driveway. The same car that's been there for weeks now, in exactly the same position, with that thin layer of dust on the windshield that suggests it hasn't been driven recently. But people don't drive every day, especially retired people. I've been thinking about getting better locks for the doors, not because I'm worried about security, but because the current ones are old and sometimes they don't catch properly. Sometimes I'll check a door that I'm sure I locked and find that it's actually open, just a mechanical problem. Old hardware gets worn down over time. The basement door is the worst. I hardly ever go down there anyway, just to check the water heater occasionally, but that door never seems to stay closed properly. I'll shut it firmly and hear the latch click, but later I'll notice it's standing open again. There must be something wrong with the frame, or maybe the house has settled and the door doesn't align right anymore. I definitely don't go down there at night. There's no reason to. It's just a normal basement with concrete walls and a few storage boxes. Nothing interesting. Nothing that would draw me down those wooden steps in the dark, following a sound like someone calling my name very softly. I don't hear sounds like that anyway. The house is always perfectly quiet at night now. Well, except for the humming, but that's probably just the refrigerator or the heating system. Old appliances make noise. It's not like the sound is coming from somewhere else entirely, somewhere that feels both very far away and right inside my head at the same time. That would be impossible. I've been eating less lately, but that's probably just because I'm not as hungry. Sometimes when you're focused on other things, you forget about food. It's not because everything tastes slightly metallic now, like I'm tasting the air from somewhere else. My sense of taste is fine. I just prefer simpler foods now, things that don't have much flavor to begin with. And I've been sleeping with the lights on sometimes, not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because I've been reading before bed and sometimes I just fall asleep with the book open. It's easier than fumbling around in the dark looking for the switch. The light doesn't bother me anyway. I sleep just as deeply with it on. Though sometimes I wake up and all the lights in the house are on, not just the bedroom. Every single one, including the ones in rooms I never use, but I must have turned them on and forgot. When you're tired, you do things automatically without really thinking about them. It's not like someone else is in the house, moving from room to room, turning on lights for reasons I can't understand. The electric bill has been higher lately, but that's probably just seasonal changes in usage. Or maybe the rates went up. Utility companies do that sometimes. It's not related to anything else. I've been avoiding that window lately. Not avoiding it exactly, just not spending as much time there. There's nothing interesting to see anyway, just the same view I've looked at hundreds of times. The same yard, the same trees, the same neighbor's house with all its dark windows. No point in standing there night after night, watching for something that isn't there. Because nothing is there, nothing was ever there. That night was completely ordinary, and every night since then has been ordinary too. I sleep well, I wake up refreshed, I go about my daily routine without any problems. Everything is exactly as it should be. The only thing is, I keep having this feeling that it's going to happen again soon. Not that anything happened the first time, of course, but whatever didn't happen then, I have the strangest certainty that it won't happen again very soon. Maybe tonight, maybe when I'm standing by that window, looking out at the moonlight, listening to the silence that seems to be waiting for something. But I'm sure it will be just as uneventful as last time. Story 9. Wasn't unusual for the windows to be left open at night. A small breeze could slip through, unsettling the curtains just enough to ripple the shadows on the walls. The latch didn't always catch, but I never worried about it. The night air carried familiar sounds: an owl's call, branches swaying. Sometimes the window would be opened by morning beyond where I left it. I noticed a scuffed patch on the windowsill, darker than the rest, slightly misaligned. I shut the window each night, knowing it wouldn't stay closed. I never bothered to check why. Nothing happened that night. I want to be clear about that from the start. I went to sleep like any other night, and I woke up in my bed the next morning. Everything was exactly as it should have been. The covers were still tucked around me. My pillow was in the right place, and the room looked completely normal. There's really nothing to tell. I didn't see anything unusual. The darkness was just darkness, the way it always is when you close your eyes. Maybe I heard some sounds, but that's normal too. Houses make noises. Wood settles. Pipes expand. The refrigerator hums. It's all perfectly ordinary, and I'm sure that's all it was. The sound wasn't like anything I'd heard before, but I'm certain it was just the house settling. It had this quality to it, like metal being drawn slowly across glass, but softer somehow, more deliberate. But that's just how I remember it now, which doesn't mean anything. Memory plays tricks on you, especially when you're half asleep. I probably wasn't even really awake when I thought I heard it. I didn't get up to investigate. There was no reason to. I stayed in bed with my eyes closed because that's what you do when you're sleeping. The sound came from somewhere near the window, but I knew it was just the wind. Even though there wasn't any wind that night, the air was completely still, which I only know because I definitely didn't look outside to check. The temperature in the room felt different, but that's normal too. Sometimes rooms get warmer or cooler during the night. It felt like the air had become thicker, almost viscous, the way it gets before a storm, but there was no storm coming. I would have known if there was going to be a storm. The air tasted metallic, but that was probably just my sinuses. People get congested at night. I kept my eyes closed the entire time. I didn't see the light that started filtering through my eyelids, soft and blue-white, but not like moonlight. Moonlight doesn't move like that, in slow waves across the ceiling, but I wouldn't know how it moved because I didn't see it. My eyes were closed. I was asleep. The light had a quality to it that seemed almost liquid. It pooled in the corners of the room first, then spread along the walls like it was following some kind of pattern. But that's just how I imagine it might have looked if I had been watching, which I wasn't. The light didn't make any sound, but somehow it felt loud. It felt like it was humming at a frequency just below what you could actually hear. Nothing touched me. I want to be very clear about that. I felt completely safe in my bed under my covers, exactly where I belonged. If something had brushed against my arm, it would have been the sheet shifting. If something had traced a line along my forehead, it would have been a drop of perspiration. The sensation of fingers, long and cool, pressing gently against my temples was obviously just a headache starting. I didn't feel myself being lifted. That's ridiculous. People don't get lifted out of their beds. I stayed exactly where I was all night. The sensation of floating, of being carried through the air like I weighed nothing at all, was clearly just a dream. The feeling of cool air moving past my skin as I drifted toward the window was just the air conditioning, even though the air conditioning wasn't running. The window was still closed when this didn't happen, I'm sure of that, but somehow I could see through it perfectly clearly, as if the glass wasn't there at all. The view outside looked different than it usually does, but that was probably just the angle. Everything looked blue and silver, like it was underwater. The trees weren't moving even though I could hear them rustling, but I wasn't really seeing any of this because I was asleep in my bed. I never left my room. The hallway outside my door stayed exactly the same as always. I didn't float down it, watching the familiar pictures on the walls blur past me. The family photos didn't turn to watch me as I passed. The faces in them didn't shift and change, becoming longer and paler until they weren't faces I recognized anymore. That would be impossible. The stairs didn't creak under my weight because I wasn't on them. I was still in bed, but if I had been on the stairs, they would have creaked the way they always do, on the 3rd step and the 7th step. Except they didn't creak at all, as if I wasn't really there, or as if the house was holding its breath. The silence felt thick and deliberate, like it was waiting for something. I didn't go outside. The front door stayed locked all night, just like it should. I never felt the cool grass under my bare feet, or saw how different everything looked in that strange blue light. The yard didn't seem bigger than usual, stretching out farther than it should have been able to go. The fence at the back of the property wasn't gone, replaced by an open field that definitely isn't there during the day. There was nothing in the field, just grass and a few scattered trees, exactly what you'd expect to see. I didn't walk toward the center of the field, where the grass grew in a perfect circle, darker and taller than the rest. I didn't notice how quiet everything was, how even my footsteps seemed muffled, as if the ground was absorbing all sound. The thing in the center of the circle wasn't there, I'm sure of that. There was nothing unusual about the field at all. If there had been something there, it would have been a rock or maybe a piece of old farm equipment. It certainly wouldn't have been smooth and metallic, about the size of a small car but shaped wrong, like it had been folded in ways that didn't make sense. I didn't approach it. I stayed exactly where I was, which was in my bed, asleep. But the surface of the thing seemed to ripple when I got closer, like liquid mercury, but perfectly solid. It was warm to the touch, even though the night air was cool. I could feel heat radiating from it before I even reached out my hand, which I didn't do because I wasn't there. The opening appeared without any sound. One moment the surface was solid, and the next there was a doorway, perfectly round, leading into an interior that glowed with that same blue-white light. The edges of the opening weren't sharp like they'd been cut. They were smooth, organic, like the metal had simply chosen to part. I didn't go inside. That would have been foolish, and I'm not a foolish person. I stayed outside in the field, which is where I wasn't because I was still in my bedroom. But if I had looked inside, I would have seen a corridor that stretched much farther than the exterior dimensions should have allowed. The walls curved in a way that made my eyes water to follow them. The floor was warm under my feet, warmer than the outside of the thing had been. It felt alive somehow, like it was responding to my presence. Each step I didn't take left a brief impression that faded after a few seconds, as if the floor was remembering and then choosing to forget. The corridor led to a larger space, round like the opening but vast. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, but somehow the room was filled with that gentle blue light. It came from everywhere and nowhere, casting no shadows at all. The walls were covered in patterns that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them, geometric designs that almost made sense, but not quite. I wasn't examined. Nothing like that happened to me. I remained in complete control of my body the entire time I was sleeping in my bed. The table in the center of the room was probably just something I dreamed about later. It was made of the same material as everything else, but it felt different when I was placed on it. Softer, more yielding, like it was adjusting itself to make me comfortable. The beings around me weren't there. I was alone the whole time, safely asleep in my own room. But if they had been there, they would have been perfectly ordinary, tall and pale, with large eyes that reflected the blue light like mirrors. Their movements were careful and precise, like they were afraid of startling me. They never spoke, but somehow I understood that they meant no harm. Their hands were cool and gentle when they touched me, which they didn't because they weren't there. The examinations they performed were thorough, but not painful. They seemed particularly interested in my head, running their long fingers through my hair and pressing gently at the base of my skull. I felt a strange, tingling sensation, like mild electricity, but it wasn't unpleasant. They showed me things, but I don't remember what they were. Images that appeared in the air above me, moving and shifting like living photographs. Scenes of places I'd never been, or maybe places that didn't exist yet. Cities of glass and light, forests of silver trees, oceans that glowed with their own inner fire. None of it was real, of course, just dreams. I tried to speak to them, but no sound came out of my mouth. They seemed to understand anyway, tilting their heads in what might have been acknowledgement. One of them reached out and touched my forehead, and suddenly I could hear their thoughts, or what I imagined their thoughts might sound like. They were curious about me, about my kind, about the world I came from. They asked me questions without words, about my life, my fears, my hopes for the future. I found myself answering honestly, more honestly than I'd ever been with anyone. It felt safe to tell them everything, like they would understand in ways that other people couldn't. But this conversation never happened because I was asleep in my bed the entire night. When they were finished, they helped me sit up on the table. I felt different, somehow lighter, like something heavy had been removed from inside me. The tingling sensation in my head had faded, but I could still feel an echo of it, a warmth that seemed to pulse gently in rhythm with my heartbeat. They led me back through the corridor, moving slowly so I could keep up. My legs felt unsteady, like I'd been sitting for a very long time. The patterns on the walls seemed more familiar now, like I was starting to understand their meaning. But understanding slipped away the moment I tried to focus on it. The opening closed behind me as I stepped out into the field. The surface of the thing became solid again, seamless, as if the doorway had never existed. But I could still feel the warmth radiating from it, and when I placed my palm against the metal, I thought I could sense movement inside, like a heartbeat. The walk back across the field felt longer than the walk out had been. The grass seemed taller, and I had trouble finding the path I'd taken before. But eventually I reached the edge of my yard, where the fence should have been but wasn't. The house looked exactly the same as always, familiar and welcoming. I didn't float back up to my room. I walked up the stairs like a normal person, even though I was still asleep in my bed. The pictures on the walls had returned to normal, showing the same family faces they always had, but something about their expressions seemed different, more knowing, like they were keeping a secret. My room was exactly as I'd left it. The covers were still pulled back where I'd gotten out of bed, which I hadn't done. The window was still closed and locked. I slipped back under the covers and closed my eyes, and within moments I was asleep again, dreaming normal dreams about normal things. I woke up the next morning feeling refreshed and completely normal. There was nothing unusual about the night at all. I went about my day exactly as I always do, and I didn't think about what hadn't happened even once. Well, maybe once or twice, but only because dreams can seem so vivid sometimes. The small mark behind my ear is probably just a bug bite. It's perfectly round and about the size of a pinhead, but bug bites can look like that sometimes. It doesn't hurt, but it feels warm when I touch it, and sometimes I think I can feel that gentle pulsing again, but that's probably just my imagination. I've been sleeping better since that night. My dreams are more vivid, filled with colors I don't have names for and places that feel more real than reality. Sometimes I wake up with the taste of metal in my mouth, but that's probably just from my dental work. The fillings in my back teeth have been bothering me lately. The window still doesn't stay closed properly. I've been meaning to fix the latch, but I keep forgetting. Sometimes I wake up and it's open wider than I remember leaving it, and there are scuff marks on the windowsill that look fresh. But old houses are like that. Things shift and settle. I've started leaving it open on purpose now, just a little bit to let in the fresh air. The night sounds are comforting, and sometimes I hear that soft, metallic sound again like a distant song. It's probably just the wind in the trees, but it helps me fall asleep. It reminds me of something pleasant, though I can't quite remember what. Nothing is going to happen tonight either, I'm sure of that. I'll go to sleep in my own bed, in my own room, and I'll stay there until morning. The window will be open just a crack, the way I like it now, and if that blue light starts to filter through the curtains again, I'll keep my eyes closed and pretend I don't see it. Because nothing happened before and nothing will happen again. I'm perfectly safe, perfectly normal, and there's absolutely nothing to worry about. The warmth behind my ear is getting stronger, and I think I can hear them calling. Story 10. Every evening, a subtle mark would appear at the edge of my window, faint and indistinct, as if drawn hurriedly. It was there again last night, same as always, a small line that didn't seem to belong. Over time, I noticed it began shifting ever so slightly, never more than an inch, but always further from its original spot. This morning, I woke to find the mark absent, replaced by an unfamiliar smudge. It could be nothing, but why does it feel like a sign I'm meant to decipher? I've been trying to piece things together. The doctors say memory works in strange ways after trauma, that fragments return when they're ready. But these aren't memories, are they? They're something else. Sensations that cling to the inside of my skull like smoke. The mark on the window, I remember staring at it for hours, my breath fogging the glass. But was I looking out or looking in? The distinction seems important now, though I can't say why. My fingertips remember the cold surface, the way condensation would gather and drip down in perfect vertical lines. Always vertical, never diagonal. There's a sound that comes back to me, a low hum like electricity running through water. It would start soft, barely noticeable, then grow until it filled every corner of whatever room I was in. Was I in a room? Sometimes I think it was outdoors, under an open sky that felt too heavy, pressing down with the weight of something watching. I keep finding myself reaching for my left shoulder. There's nothing there now, just skin and bone and the faint ridge of an old scar I don't remember getting. But my hand goes there automatically, like muscle memory searching for something that should be there. A weight, a pressure, fingers that weren't mine. The taste of copper never fully leaves my mouth anymore. It's strongest when I wake up, metallic and sharp, coating my teeth and tongue. I've checked for blood. There's never any blood, but the taste lingers, mixing with the smell of damp concrete that seems to follow me everywhere. Sometimes I remember walking, long corridors with fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered in patterns that almost made sense. The floor was always wet, though I never saw water. My footsteps would echo, but the sound would come back wrong, like someone else was walking just behind me, matching my pace but not quite synchronized. The figure in the doorway, that memory comes back clearest, though I wish it wouldn't. Motionless, completely still, like a photograph of a person rather than an actual person. I couldn't see the face. There was light behind it, harsh and white, turning everything into silhouette, but I knew it was watching me, waiting for something. I've been checking the window every morning since then. The mark changes, but it's always there in some form. Sometimes it's higher up, sometimes lower. Once it appeared on the inside of the glass, though I swear I never touched it. My breath caught in my throat when I saw that. The wrongness of it made my skin crawl. There are gaps in my memory where whole hours should be. I'll be sitting at my kitchen table and suddenly it's dark outside. Or I'll be getting dressed in the morning and then I'm standing in my bathroom at what feels like the same time, but my clothes are different. Wrinkled, damp with sweat I don't remember producing. The hum is getting stronger. It starts in my chest now, a vibration that works its way up through my ribs and into my throat. Sometimes I catch myself humming along, though I stop as soon as I realize what I'm doing. The melody is wrong, discordant, like music played backwards or underwater. I found scratches on my bedroom door last week. 4 parallel lines, too deep to have been made by fingernails, but too precise to be accidental damage. They weren't there before. I'm sure they weren't there before. But when I touched them, my fingers fit perfectly into the grooves, like I'd traced them 1,000 times. The light behind the door, that's another fragment that won't stay buried. It would seep out around the edges, white and cold, creating geometric patterns on the floor that hurt to look at directly. I remember thinking I should open the door, but my hand couldn't move. Something was holding me back, keeping me frozen in place while that light pulsed and breathed. My dreams are full of corridors now, endless hallways that branch and split and loop back on themselves. The walls are always damp, beaded with moisture that reflects the flickering lights above. I can hear my footsteps echoing, but when I look down, I can't see my feet. Just the wet floor stretching out beneath me, marked with footprints that might be mine. The smell of overheated skin follows me everywhere, sweet and sick, like fever sweat left to dry and sour. It's strongest in enclosed spaces, bathrooms and closets, and the space between my bed and the wall. I've scrubbed every surface in my apartment, but the smell remains, clinging to the air like invisible fog. There was a moment, just one, when everything felt clear. I was standing in front of a mirror, but my reflection was wrong. Not distorted, not missing, just wrong in a way I couldn't define. The person looking back at me had my face, my eyes, my mouth, but they were doing something I wasn't doing, moving when I was still, smiling when I was afraid. The mark on the window is moving faster now. Each morning it's inches away from where it was the night before, creeping along the glass like it's alive. I've tried washing it off, but it always comes back. Sometimes I think I can see it moving in real time, a slow migration across the surface that makes my vision blur and my head pound. I keep finding things in my pockets that I don't remember putting there. Small objects, meaningless on their own, but somehow significant when taken together. A button from a coat I've never owned. A key that doesn't fit any lock in my apartment. A folded piece of paper with writing I can't read, though the handwriting looks familiar. The figure in the doorway was waiting for something. I know that now, though I can't explain how. It stood there for what felt like hours, perfectly still, while that harsh light blazed behind it. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't work. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. All I could do was watch and wait for whatever was supposed to happen next. The hum is constant now. It never stops, just varies in intensity like a heartbeat or breathing. Sometimes it syncs up with my pulse, and for those moments I feel like I'm dissolving, becoming part of something larger and more terrible than myself. My vision blurs, my hands shake, the taste of copper floods my mouth. I think something is trying to come back, something I've been keeping locked away in the dark corners of my mind. The memories are getting stronger, more vivid, harder to ignore. The mark on the window moves more each day. The scratches on my door seem deeper. The smell of damp concrete grows thicker. Last night I woke up standing in front of my bathroom mirror. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't remember walking there. But I was standing there in the dark, staring at my reflection that wasn't quite right, while that familiar hum filled the air around me. My shoulder ached where invisible fingers had been. The corridor dreams are bleeding into my waking hours now. I'll be walking down the street, and suddenly the pavement looks like wet concrete. The buildings around me seem too tall, their windows reflecting light that comes from nowhere. I can hear my footsteps echoing off surfaces that shouldn't echo, and when I look over my shoulder, there's always a shadow that moves just a fraction too late. I'm starting to understand that the mark on the window isn't random. It's tracking something, measuring distance or time or some other quantity I can't grasp. Each morning it's moved closer to the center of the glass, following a path that curves inward like a spiral. I've tried to calculate where it's heading, but the mathematics hurt my brain. The figure in the doorway had no face. That detail came back to me suddenly, violently, like surfacing from deep water. Where features should have been, there was just smooth skin stretched tight over bone. But somehow it was still watching me, still waiting, still radiating that terrible patience that made my skin crawl and my stomach turn. There are moments when I catch myself doing things I don't remember deciding to do. I'll be reaching for a door handle before I realize I wanted to open the door. I'll be turning toward a sound before I consciously hear it. My body seems to be operating on instructions I'm not aware of giving, following patterns I don't understand. The taste of copper is strongest when I think about the light behind the door. That cold white radiance that seeped out around the edges and painted geometric shadows on everything it touched. I remember thinking it was beautiful and terrible at the same time, hypnotic in a way that made me want to look away but couldn't. My apartment feels smaller now. The walls seem closer together, the ceiling lower, the windows narrower. Sometimes I'll walk from room to room and feel like I'm moving through a maze that's slowly contracting around me. The air grows thicker with each step, heavy with the smell of damp concrete and overheated skin. The scratches on my bedroom door have multiplied. 4 became 8, became 12. They cover the entire surface now, carved deep into the wood in parallel lines that follow no pattern I can discern. When I run my fingers over them, they feel warm to the touch, like they're generating their own heat. I think the mark on the window is almost ready for what I don't know, but there's an urgency to its movement now that wasn't there before. It jerks and slides across the glass in sudden bursts, leaving smears and trails that look almost like writing in a language I don't recognize. The hum has changed. It's not just sound anymore, but something deeper, a vibration that reaches into my bones and organs and blood. I can feel it reshaping me from the inside, preparing me for whatever comes next. My reflection in mirrors looks more wrong each day, like it's becoming someone else entirely. Something is waking up, something that's been sleeping in the spaces between my memories, feeding on the gaps and growing stronger. I can feel it stirring, stretching, testing the boundaries of whatever has been keeping it contained. The mark on the window moves faster. The scratches on my door grow deeper. The figure in the doorway steps closer. I need to stop writing now. The hum is too loud and my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold the pen. But I think I finally understand what the mark has been measuring. Distance. The distance between here and there, between now and then, between what was and what's coming back. It's almost close enough to touch the glass from the other side.